Welcome back to Storytime with Mr. Dent. Today's story is Perfectly Norman by Tom Percival. This is a story all about a little boy called Norman who had always been perfectly normal until something in his life changes. Can you think of a time in your life where something changes? Norman had always been perfectly normal, until one day he grew a pair of wings. See, Norman had always imagined growing a little bit taller, growing a beard like his dad's, but never did he imagine he would grow a pair of wings. Still, they were here now, so he was going to test them out. Soon, Norman was swooshing around and generally having the most fun ever. But then, he had to go in for tea. You see, Norman had always been so normal, he didn't know how his parents would feel about his extraordinary wings. So when he went in, Norman decided to cover himself up in a great big coat. His parents didn't notice the wings, but they did think it was a little bit odd that he was wearing a coat indoors. Bath times became problematic, as did bedtimes. The coat was so hot and uncomfortable, but Norman had decided that nobody should see his wings ever. The next day, Norman went to the park, but it was far too hot to play any of his favourite games, and it just kept going on. Long car journeys were unbearable, the swimming baths were even worse, but nothing compared to his friend's birthday party. The only time that Norman felt normal now was when it rained. One day, a boy tried to pull his coat off, and Norman had to run away, hot-faced, angry and sad. He wished he'd never grown these stupid wings. Then he saw some birds high up in the sky, and he remembered the joy of that first flight. And it occurred to Norman that it was the coat that was making him miserable, not the wings. "Why don't you take that tatty old thing off?" suggested his mum and dad. Norman looked up at them hesitantly. His parents smiled and nodded. Norman smiled back. Then he threw off the coat, let his wonderful wings fan out. Norman leapt into the air. Finally, he was free of that coat. He noticed the other children wearing thick, heavy coats of their own. They looked up at Norman and round at each other nervously. There was a moment's pause, and then, whoosh! The sky was filled with people flying. Norman had never felt so happy. He realised that there was no such thing as perfectly normal. But it was perfectly Norman, which is the way it should be.